So why don't we jump in? So this is Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 through 19. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah, the prophet, for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So I gave my attention to the Lord, to seek him by praying and pleading with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed and said, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant and faithfulness for those who love him and keep his commandments, we have sinned. We have done wrong and acted wickedly and rebelled, even turning aside from your commandments and ordinances. Moreover, we have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our leaders, our fathers, and all the people of the land. Righteousness belongs to you, Lord, but to us open shame, as it is this day to the men of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Israel, those who are nearby and those who are far away, in all the countries to which you have driven them, because of their unfaithful deeds which they have committed against you. Open shame belongs to us, Lord, to our kings, our leaders, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belong compassion and forgiveness, because we have rebelled against him, and we have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his teachings, which he set before us through his servants and prophets. Indeed, all Israel has violated your law and turned aside, not obeying your voice. So the curse has gushed forth on us, along with the oath which is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. So he has confirmed his words which he had spoken against us and against our rulers who ruled us, to bring on us great disaster. For under the entire heaven there has not been done anything like what was done in Jerusalem. Just as it was written in the law of Moses, all this disaster has come on us, yet we have not sought the favor of the Lord our God by turning from our wrongdoing and giving attention to your truth. So the Lord has kept the disaster in store and brought it on us, for the Lord our God is righteous with respect to all his deeds which he has done, but we have not obeyed his voice. And now, Lord our God, you who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand and made a name for yourself, as it is this day, we have sinned. We have been wicked. Lord, in accordance with all your righteous acts, let now your anger and your wrath turn away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy mountain. For because of our sins and all the wrongdoings of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people have become an object of taunting to all those around us. So now, our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his pleas, and for your sake, Lord, let your face shine on your desolate sanctuary. My God, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolations and the city which is called by your name. For we are not presenting our pleas before you based on any merits of our own, but based on your great compassion. Lord, hear. Lord, forgive. Lord, listen and take action. For your own sake, my God, do not delay, because your city and your people are called by your name. So that is Daniel's prayer, and that is a pretty intense prayer.
Yeah, pretty deep and very, very mournful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So starting there in verse 1, we see here that this is the first year of Darius, who is the new king. He's the Medo king of the Medo-Persians. And Darius is familiar. He's in chapter 6. He is the king with the lion's den. So he likes Daniel. He's a fan of Daniel. Mm-hmm. He's seen the work of Daniel's God. So we know this king. We know this time frame, right?
Yeah.
And something interesting here, Daniel is reading the book of Jeremiah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah, we don't, we often hear, you hear, Jesus quoting from the Old Testament, and you also hear things like, oh, your forefathers heard, or your forefathers, but rarely do you ever hear, this specific. Like he was reading this actual
Yeah.
book, and very rarely do you see that. And Jeremiah obviously is very deep with prophecy as well. So, very interesting that is pointed out here.
It reminds me in the book of Kings, we see one of the kings, I forget which one it is. The kings are kind of starting to turn away from God, and one of them finds the scrolls.
Yeah.
Basically. And it's like they had this Old Testament, they had these prophecies, they had these tales, these histories of their people.
Right.
But they kind of forgot about them.
Yeah.
And they stopped reading them.
Yeah.
And they hid them away.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, putting your Bible on your shelf where it gets dusty and you have knickknacks stacked on top of it and you forget that it's even there.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. So that's what was that's what happened in Israel. That's why God essentially turned his back on them for a time to allow his righteousness and his judgment to take place for those sins, right?
Yeah, and how quickly we forget, right? And that's why, you see, in other parts how important, God talks about like remembering your history when they cross the river, like, hey, take some stones and put them here so that the young children ask about them so that you can explain it, because this is what I've done for you. And you think about all the things that God did for the state of Israel or the country of Israel, and just how much he loved them, and that these were his people, and yet they, as you mentioned here, kind of put them on a shelf and forgot who they were and where they came from.
It's important to remember too that we are them.
Right.
Like, we look at that stuff and say, how could you possibly, you go back to them being taken out of Egypt, and like they get across the sea that's been miraculously split. Mm-hmm. They've got food falling from heaven. They're following a pillar of fire and a cloud by day.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I just don't know that this God's going to be able to take care of us.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why the Old Testament is important, and because we often, it's obviously much longer than the New Testament, and obviously the New Testament is the New Covenant post Jesus resurrection, and so that's where we are in the span of history, and that's the covenant that we live under that forgiveness. And so sometimes we often that's Old Testament, like that's and while I always say it's when you're first learning the Bible and you're first coming to Christ, read the New Testament and learn it. That's obviously where you start.
Yeah.
The importance of the Old Testament is just to show one, this is why we needed the New Testament. This is why Jesus needed to go to the cross, but also it is a comfort of historical, like you think about these, I was actually just talking to somebody the other day who's just dealing with some stuff. I said, God always shows up, and we think about how we're in a tough spot, but we're also not leading thousands of people, and we're at the edge of a river, and there's thousands of people behind us trying to kill us. We're not in a war, and the dad of our best friend is trying to murder us, even though we're the rightly next king of Israel.
Right.
We're not, in a den of lions or a furnace, and God saved all of those situations. And so, struggling financially with your job is child's play to what God has already done, and we can read it and see it.
Absolutely. To your point, all these things, there's so much in the New Testament that you don't understand if you don't understand the context of the Old Testament.
Sure.
It creates the context for what Jesus is saying, what his disciples are saying, why Jesus came. Yeah. So these things are important for us, and you're right. It's the story of how God showed up over and over and over again. It's his story. And, for some reason, these folks forgot it.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to look back at it and say, how did you forget it? You were right there.
Right.
You saw these miraculous things that I may never see in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Right. If I saw those things, surely I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And yet I probably would.
Yeah, we say the same thing about the disciples. How are these guys so dense? They watched Jesus feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Give us a sign, Jesus.
Yeah. Peter.
But we have the benefit of being able to look back and having it all written down for us, and having seen it, know how the story ends.
Yeah.
And yet we still
Peter
are the same way.
Peter saw the transfiguration.
Yeah.
Peter heard the voice of God from heaven, and he still denied him 3 times.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So coming back to Daniel, if Daniel was reading in Jeremiah. So if you look at Jeremiah 25:11 through 13 and 29:10, it describes the Lord beginning an end to the desolation of Israel at the hand of the Babylonians. So Jeremiah prophesied that Babylon would carry them away and desolate Israel. But he also prophesied that it would come to an end and that the Lord would return his people to their place, their rightful place, which was Jerusalem.
Right.
So Daniel regarded this very literally. He read it and he saw that Jeremiah pointed out a specific time frame. Hey, these are 70 years.
Yeah.
Right. And he took that very literally. I think that's a cue for us with how we read Daniel. Because in Daniel, there are specific literal time frames.
Yeah.
The problem that we run into is recognizing when those time frames start so that we know when they're going to end.
Right.
Well, was this specifically for when they encounter Antiochus, or is this for the end times? And when is the end times? And who is the Antichrist?
Right.
The answers we don't have will inform when those time periods start.
Yeah.
Right. So he regards these as literal. He believes that God's intent is to restore his people at the end of this time frame, and it's 70 years, right? So there are 3 dates of note within this prophecy, right? So, and remember when we look at BC dates, remember that the higher the number, the further back in history it is.
Right. Yeah. It's
Sometimes
backwards from where we are.
Yeah, sometimes I forget that. All right. So the nation of Israel is officially exiled in 587 BC. Okay. Jerusalem is attacked and the treasures are taken from the temple in 597 BC. So it was actually 10 years from the time they sacked Jerusalem to the time they exiled the nation, right? In 605 BC is when Jerusalem is initially attacked and Daniel was taken captive, right? So Daniel begins praying for God to keep his promise several years early based on his earliest date. So Daniel is starting the 70 years in 605 BC because he says this is when we first started being taken from the land.
Yeah.
He could have looked at 597. He could have looked at 587, but he went to the earliest time and said, this is where it begins. And so he says, this is the beginning of those 70 years. And if I'm not mistaken, and we might see this later in here, they're not yet at the full 70 years, I think, when he's making this prayer.
Right.
They're very close. They're like 67, 68 years, something in that area, if I'm not mistaken. And so that actually means Daniel's fairly old at this point.
Yeah.
Right. But he starts praying early for the completion of the thing that is to occur in 70 years. And I think it's interesting. That he's even praying for the completion of a prophecy. If it's prophesied, isn't it like, oh, well, then it's going to happen. Right. So why does he need to ask God to honor his prophecy?
Yeah.
And I think we're going to cover that a little bit here as we continue, because one of the first things that Daniel does when he begins praying is he recognizes multiple aspects of what has been happening. He recognizes that God is great. Then he recognizes that God is faithful. And he also recognizes that he and his people are sinful and rebellious, right?
Right.
He says he ascribes righteousness and mercy and compassion to God and ascribes shame to God's people. Mm-hmm. And he agrees with God that everything God has done, he has done with good reason. This exile was good. It was right. It was just, right? When you're in the midst of being held captive, it can be challenging to see that as God's justice. Yeah. Because you're the one who's in captivity. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that he throughout this whole prayer, he says we.
Yes.
Not they.
Yeah.
He doesn't, he recognizes that as good and righteous as he is also not perfect, and that he is, he's a part of this group, even though God has given him this prophecy, which, he is you could tell he is just agonizing about, you know, I mean, so I turned to verse 3, I turned to the Lord and pleaded with him in prayer and petition, in fasting and in sackcloth and ashes. And we see that earlier before, and we see that later on, that this is all heavy stuff for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I can almost feel this, like his prayer feels like an impassioned monologue that you might see in a Shakespearean play.
Right.
You know, like it's
Yeah.
He's really contending with this and pouring his heart out at this point.
Yeah. Well, and he recognizes that, like, while as hard as all of this is also fair.
Yes.
You know, like God is not evil. God is not unjust. He is fair. He is just in his blessings, that he's just in his judgments, and
it's important for him to say these things and recognize the sin, because what in essence he's doing is repenting.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, yes, these sins were here. They deserved recompense. They deserved to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And God, you are fair in judging them. And
Right.
then he doesn't appeal to God's fairness. He appeals to God's compassion and forgiveness. Right. He doesn't say, God, if you don't let us go, then you've been unjust.
Yeah.
Instead, he says, you are just, and I ask for you to show compassion on us in accordance with your word.
Right.
Right. And God is faithful in that sense. So I think there is something, like, we can really learn a lot from these prayers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He asks God to move his wrath away from the people of Israel, and he asks God to open his eyes and ears to his people. He's asking God to be aware of both his prayer and the suffering of the people of God, right?
Right.
And he's appealing to God's love and mercy. He's asking the judge to look down and to be satisfied, but even more so to now turn his anger onto those who brought his people low, right? This is something that I think sometimes we miss. God exiled the people of Israel in judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And each time that he brought his people into captivity, he punished those who held them captive.
Yeah.
Right? He allowed them to be held in captivity, but he did not turn to the other group and say, now they're my people now.
Yeah.
He instead said, you've held my people captive. I'm now going to release them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we see them being blessed or cursed based on how they treated those people during those times, right? So he says, look, turn your anger away from us and turn it towards the people who are against us.
Mm-hmm.
So he asks God to do this according to his righteousness. So again, we're seeing he's appealing to God's nature during this prayer. It takes me to the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
How does it start?
Our Father.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, right? So that starts with a declaration of the holiness of God, right?
Right.
He is declaring things like this, and he's asking God to make on earth what it is in heaven, right? Daniel repeats an expression, for your own sake, multiple times during this prayer as well. Daniel understands that God's people being in everlasting captivity does not glorify God.
Yeah.
It does not fulfill the things that God had promised. It does not show God as being powerful or strong or being glorious. It's not that he is not those things, but it doesn't showcase it, right? And so he is asking God to be that he delivers them from captivity to continue to glorify his name. So I think those are the notes that I have right here for that prayer specifically. I mean, there was a lot there. Any other thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, just one of the things that I noted, I wrote down between verses 16 through 19. He's praying for God's glory, not their needs.
Yes.
He's like, this is for as you mentioned in the Lord's Prayer, like the whole first, there's a lot of things that we are, Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And then Give us this day our daily bread. There's a lot of things that we are called to do and to worship before we ask for anything. And kind of in the same manner here. I mean, Daniel's praying the Lord's Prayer before Jesus gave us the Lord's Prayer. Yeah. He's saying, for your glory, not for our needs,
Yeah, he's modeling that prayer before Jesus ever teaches on it.
Yeah.
And it is to seek first the kingdom, and all these things are added.
Right.
Right.